welcome to the March 19, 2013 meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have a roll call, please?
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here. The flag salute will be led by Council Member Weaver and the invocation by the Reverend Skip Lindeman of La Cañada Church.
Please join with me in our flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Thank you.
Let us pray. Oh God, thank you for choosing us to do the people's business. Help us to be fair as well as courageous, fair as well as bold. Oh God, help us to do what is right, not what is expedient. Help us to stand up for life and sanity, not madness that masquerades as rights. Help us, oh God, to have the courage to do the right thing in your sight. Amen.
Amen.
Brevity.
Mr. Clerk, may we have your report?
The agenda for the March 19, 2013 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, March 14, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Next on the agenda is presentation and appointments. At 3A is the agenda previews for the meetings of March 26, 2013.
What's next?
Reports.
I'll go ahead.
Spears.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for the Glendale Housing Authority, we have no business agenda items. We do, however, in the afternoon have a City Council and successor agency meeting. 2 items: public hearing, Director of Community Development. This is regarding proposed courtyard by Marriott Hotel Development to be located at 225 West Wilson Avenue. Director of Community Development regarding the Alex Theater fiscal year 2012-13 second quarter report and expansion project. That afternoon as well, we have a special meeting of the Glendale City Council. 2 items: public hearing, Director of Community Development. This is regarding revisions to approved sign program for the Americana at brand Nordstrom and request for variances. And a public hearing, Director of Community Development. This is regarding proposed development of a 5-story, 315 apartment unit project to be located at 607 through 633 North Central Avenue and 317 through 321 West Doran and 314 through 324 Pioneer Avenue, and a 5-story, 192 apartment unit project, which is Site B, to be located at 526 through 540 North Central, 200 through 214 West Doran, and 527 through 531 North Orange Street. That evening for the City Council to commence at 6 p.m. Under consent, we have General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, City of Glendale Civic Center parking structure LED lighting retrofit. General Manager of Glendale Water and Power. This is regarding custodial services at various GWP facilities, and this is in connection with spec number 3508. We also have 3 items under action. Director of Human Resources. These are resolutions of the City of Glendale providing for the establishment of classification titles and compensation for employees of the City of Glendale. Director of Community Development, presentation of initial concept alternatives for the Space 134 project. City Manager, this is a discussion on dedicating a portion of the ARC Plaza area as a potential site to honor Glendale's sister cities. And lastly, we have a hearing, Director of Public Works. This is regarding Federal Transit Administration, Section 5310 Grant Application Program. And that reports my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Spears. Next, please.
Next at 3B is presentation of National Keep America Beautiful Awards to the City Council.
So many, give me a minute. Hello, my name is Joan Zerhut, and I'm from the Committee for Clean and Beautiful in Glendale. We function as the city's official Keep America affiliate. Keep America Beautiful is the nation's largest volunteer-based community action and education organization that engages individuals to take greater responsibility for improving their community's quality of life. For the past 10 years, Keep America Beautiful has recognized the City of Glendale as a national leader in community beautification. This year, we are awarded the following 3 awards. The Distinguished Service Award, recognizing Glendale as one of the top 3 Keep America Beautiful affiliates in the nation. The President's Circle Award for our outstanding community beautification and civil engagement programs. And the second place Beautification Award for our newest community garden on Geneva Street, featured in this short video. Thank you.
In April of 2012, Keep Glendale Beautiful received a $20,000 grant to build Glendale's third community garden. Funded by the Lowe's Charitable Foundation and Keep America Beautiful, the grant provided the seeds to make this project grow alongside a neighboring Habitat for Humanity project. Both the community garden and the Habitat for Humanity project will serve low-income families in Glendale who have previously not had the opportunity to own their own homes and grow their own fresh fruits and vegetables. After receiving the grant, the race was on to organize the building of the gardens in conjunction with Glendale's Great American Cleanup Day, which was only a short month away. Staff worked feverishly to bring together all the components of the project, including grading of the site, delivery of the organic soil and natural redwood, and drilling of the anchoring holes. Various city departments, including Public Works, Community Services and Parks, and Glendale Water and Power, all contributed to the project's preparation. Exactly 1 month after receiving the grant, the Great American Cleanup Day had arrived and it was time for the gardens to come to life. Multiple service organizations, including the Glendale Kiwanis, the Fire Cadets, and the Boy Scouts of America all pitched in to help. With the effort of over 140 volunteers working for nearly 14 hours, the garden was built. The Geneva Gardens will serve a waiting list of nearly 100 families stemming from the Monterey Road Community Gardens, who are part of over 60% of Glendale's residents who live in multifamily housing and have not had the chance to grow their own fresh produce. As Glendale's third community garden, the Geneva Gardens expands on the city's commitment towards eating healthy and living sustainably. Keep Glendale Beautiful would like to thank all of the many volunteers and sponsors, including the Lowe's Charitable Foundation, for bringing this project to life.
Thank you. And thank you, Philip Eskander, for putting that together. Thanks to the partnership between the city and the Committee for the Clean and Beautiful Glendale, we can continue these programs such as these and continue to lead the nation in a quality of life programs. It is with great honor that I present Mayor Quintero and the City of Glendale with these 3 really beautiful awards. Sorry, here we go. Forgot about this part. Here we go. There we go. All right, sorry.
I'm obviously accepting on the behalf of the city council members as well as the staff, community development staff, the planning staff, of course, Habitat for Humanity. They all worked together, all the nonprofit groups, and it turned out great. All the greens, all those greens look particularly attractive. Actually.
Mine was the best block on there.
Next, Mr. Clerk.
Next is City Council and staff comments.
Mr. Manukian.
Yes, I want to continue on my rant regarding my expeditions on a bike. I was up at Thousand Oaks last weekend, and I noticed that there were signs before you go into the trails, and the signs indicated that all dogs or animals should be on a leash. And with the Trail Safety Patrol, I think that is the most difficult thing to tell individuals who are using the trails, is to tell them that keep your dog on a leash for the dog's safety reasons. And I thought that was interesting that in Thousand Oaks they had little signs before the entry to the trails where it indicated, that dogs should be on a leash, and they had little bags and little containers where they can pick up after their dogs. And I think that's a good program to initiate here in Glendale. And it will remind individuals who are using the trails to keep their pets on a leash. So.
Anything else? Mr. Weaver?
Yes, I'd just like to clear up what might be a misconception on an ad that's running in the news press, vote no on Measure A. It seems to allude that the City Council would be picking the next treasurer, and that's absolutely not true. If you read the sample ballot, it clearly shows that the city manager would interview candidates select what he considers the best qualified, and the city council would then ratify his candidate. That's the same as every other department head in the city of Glendale, all 18 of them. So just in case, I just want you to understand, we're not going to do the city treasurer. That gentleman over there is. Thank you.
This begs a response. I'm sorry, but I thought electioneering was not allowed either over there or over here.
I'm just correcting.
If there are things that I believe you feel are incorrect, you should respond to them in the newspaper, just like I have to. I'm not here. I don't bring that issue up here. But my feeling is that regardless of how you word it and how you put it, eventually the city council will be appointing the next treasurer. So if you want to have that debate here and how much influence the city council has on their only 2 employees, we can debate that. But that's not our role here. We're not supposed to be electioneering on the dais, and I don't think it's the place. Like I said, if you want to campaign for Measure A, I think you should be buying ads just like I am in the paper and put your views in the paper just like I have.
Well, I thought I was speaking for the majority of the council that put it on the ballot.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Points taken, and I think we should stop discussion of this.
And I am writing an article to the news press.
All right. Any other comments? Any staff comments? Okay. Actually, announce the mayor's prayer breakfast, which is right around the corner.
Yes, the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast is this coming Thursday, and it's the 50th annual Mayor's Prayer Breakfast, March 21st, 2013, at the Glendale Civic Auditorium. And the keynote speaker this year is none other than Pat Boone, recording artist, actor, author, Broadway headliner. The fee or ticket price is $25, and that includes breakfast as well as entertainment. Comments by our own Mayor Frank Quintero. Master of Ceremonies is Chief DePompa. Musical entertainment is Glendale's beloved David Schultz as a soloist, the Glendale Community College Chamber Ensemble, and Aaron Shaw on the bagpipes. And for more information, interested people may call 626-429-2198. Again, that's 626-429-2198, or purchase tickets from any of the locations on the right-hand side of the screen, Beverly Ann Flowers or the Montrose Verdugo Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
All right. Let me just add, with all of the changes that I was able to make in 12 years, this was a change that I couldn't make. What's the time again? 6 o'clock, I believe?
Yes,
6
it is.
o'clock?
At the
6
crack of
o'clock.
dawn. 6:30, but doors will be open.
All right. So if you're really into it, you should get there at 5:45, 5:30.
There'll be a line around the block.
All right. What's next, Mr. Kasakian?
Next is the consent items. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before motion is proposed.
Show the consent calendar at 5.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next, please.
Next is on the agenda listed as oral communications. However, this will be the 3-minute community event announcement portion. We'll have the full 5-minute portion at the conclusion of all city business.
I have 2 cards. Carol Brusha, followed by Leon Mayer.
Good evening, Mayor Quintero and council members. My name is Carol Bruchet, and I'm here representing Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association. Tomorrow evening, Northwest Glendale homeowners will host the last city council forum before the election, and everyone is invited to attend. It is open to non-members as well as members. It begins at 7:30 at the New Life Church near Kenneth Village. The address is 1020 West Kenneth Road at the corner of Bruce. It is 1 block east of Grandview. There is parking in the rear. The entrance is on Kenneth. Doors open at 6:30, and everyone is invited. Thank you.
Thank you. Leon Mayer.
Good evening, Mayor Quintero, members of the council and staff.
My name is Leon Mayer. I'm here on behalf of the library and the Friends of the Library, and I want to report back to you that our event last Thursday with Hector Tobar for One Book, One Glendale was a tremendous success. We had a full house, and did my heart joy to see not only a lot of men and the boys there, but to see women with their children come to the event. Now, next month is Let's Celebrate National Library Week. And that's April 14th to the 20th, and we're going to have 4 authors, actually six or seven authors for independent first-time authors there. But the one I want to talk to you about tonight is Amy Willens, who will be there on April 18th. Now, Amy Willens is a nationally known writer. The New York Times Sunday Book Review compared her writing to Joan Didion. She's been featured in the LA Times. And there's a lot of people, a lot of organizations during and following the Haiti earthquake that sent money and other things to Haiti to try to help the people there. And Amy Willens' book is about a letter from Haiti, Farewell, Fred Voodoo. And this is a book and a lecture you'll all want to see, and that's going to be Thursday, April 18th at 7 o'clock at the library. Incidentally, at the library, admission is free, and you can always validate your parking with by 3 hours at the library if you park at the regular parking establishment across the street. Now, I have, just give you an example of who we're going to have during Create National Library Week. We're going to have one of our locals, a lady by the name of Wendy Lawless, who is an actor, author, and she lives here in Glendale. Her book is The Channel Bonfire. Very interesting book. I don't have time to go through all the others at this time, but I'll be here next week, to no one's surprise. Now, we do ask you to consider joining the Friends. And I have cards tonight about your library needs friends. And these are cards. It takes $10 for a student or a senior to join, $20 for a family member. Please raise your hand and I'll give you a card to just consider supporting the Friends. And we're going to have a surprise announcement next Tuesday. You'll be pleased with the person that we're bringing in May to talk to the library.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think I'm a student.
Pardon?
I'm a student. I'll take one of those student
Okay,
cards.
thank you.
Hey, Frank, you and I are seniors.
That's right.
Aren't
You
you a
got a
student
cut
too?
rate. You got a cut rate. No, actually, I've already joined.
Just hand it to the city clerk.
All right. Next, Mr. Kasakian.
Under adoption of ordinances at 7A is an ordinance prohibiting the possession and sale of firearms and ammunition on city property, introduced on March 12, 2013 by Councilmember Manukian.
I'll
Mr.
move the
Manukian.
item.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Mr.
Well, I'll just say one thing. There's no right or wrong on this issue. It's a philosophical question whether to sell guns on public property or not. To me, it's nothing else. So there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of opinion, what you think. So that's it.
Okay, we normally don't do this. That is, we've already had 2 sessions where people been allowed to speak on this issue. However, we only have 4 cards, so I will go ahead and let these 4 speakers give us their opinion. And is there anyone else that wants to speak on 7A, the ordinance pertaining to the gun show? Okay, I don't hear anyone, so
You're not taking any
I'll
more.
close the speakers. So let's hear from John Rando, followed by Bob Brennan, and then Chris Ziegler, and then Jeff Brayman.
Good evening, City Council and citizens of Glendale. My name is John Rando. I live in Glendale. Beyond what this onerous ordinance attempts to do to the First and Second Amendments on public property, what does it tell to businesses about doing business with the City of Glendale? It says that any time a City Council of Glendale feels the need, no matter how unfounded the reason, as long as greed and lust for power by one council member decides they can cause your disruption in your business and personal life to defend what is essentially legal activity. And you can have no confidence in doing any business with the city. You cannot trust the city to do business and have any hope that they will allow your business to continue for any length of time. Although they may say they are business friendly, their actions do not show this. As a business person, you will see that your business is not appreciated or valued by the city in any way, shape, or form, especially if you are involved in an activity on city property that is family-friendly, law-abiding, and has an emphasis on safety and respect for others, despite their race, creed, religion, or national origin. The city will eventually try to make your event and or business not welcome on city property. Passing this type of ordinance would not only cause law-abiding businesses and their owners to wonder when a capricious city council will take their business away, but also deter other people from wanting to do business in the city of Glendale. Thank you.
Bob Brennan, followed by Chris Ziegler.
Good evening. Not a whole lot more I can say about the ordinance that I haven't said in previous meetings, other than to express my concern about creation of gun-free zones. Virtually all of the infamous shootings have occurred in gun-free zones, and to the extent the ordinance is going to ban apparently even concealed carry holders from city property, this could be a real problem. Criminals obviously are not going to obey the law, and it's going to have the effect of keeping every law-abiding person from having a way to defend themselves. Obviously, we're not going to create a police state in Glendale, and even if we could, we couldn't afford it. Thank you.
Chris Ziegler and Jeff, can't read the last name, Bryman Borgman.
Good evening, Glendale City Council. I was here last week. This is actually the second time I've been to the City Hall to actually to speak with you. Basically, I believe that you're treating the gun show as, and the consumers as suspect, as a response to certain events that have just happened, worried about the one bad egg. As far as the elementary schools, most are closed on the weekends, no attendance. These children you've hid behind as to gain public support. Glorieta and Verdugo are pretty much the only thing I've researched, and I've found that the sporting facilities and these parks are the one thing that you should actually be naming, not the elementary schools. As well as far as Glendale College. Glendale College has a very smaller number of students on campus during the weekend. They do have weekend classes. I have attended Glendale College myself. I know it was quite a few years ago, but I still know they have weekend classes and sporting events as such at that school as well. Now, did you ever think of the revenue, the taxes that are generated from the gun show? I'm certain that they help pay for a lot of public interests, such as the parks. Is that insignificant? That's all I have to ask. Thank you.
Jeff Bregman? What's your last name, sir?
Bregman. Bregman. Sorry, I'm dyslexic with some other minor learning disabilities. Thank you. We've been up here, we've talked passionately, we've tried to talk logically. The number of my customers have told me that they've emailed the City Council over this issue and had a response back that they feel they're representing the majority of Glendale. My side of that would say, if you really feel you're representing the majority of Glendale, don't vote on it as an ordinance through 3 members of the City Council saying we believe in it. Put it to the people. Put it on an initiative at the next ballot. Then you'll really see how the people of Glendale feel about it. The majority of people have been standing up here saying, we want to keep the Glendale Gun Show. And you've shown indifference to the speakers. The other aspect of it is, is the advertising for me. As a businessman, as a business owner here in Glendale, in the firearms industry, I have looked at my ability to put up signage, my ability to put up banners, to advertise my wares is very limited and restricted because of the area of Glendale that I'm in. And I look forward to the gun show every time it comes around, because it is my best opportunity to promote my business to those people in the community, whether it is Burbank, whether it is Los Angeles, whether it is Glendale, Los Feliz area, Pasadena. It says, I'm here and I care. And that, to me, is what's important as a businessman, is I bring business in. So put it to the people. Let the people truly say they support it or they don't. One other thing to consider is, in the firearms industry, I see this happening. New York's being cut off by the manufacturers, not just of firearms, but of ammunition. Not the people, the business of New York. Firearms manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers are starting to do the same to California. How are you going to feel when the firearms manufacturers and the weapons manufacturers say, sorry, we're not sending any ammunition or firearms accessories or parts to the city of Glendale?
All right,
That's something to consider.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Najarian, you had a comment?
Thank you. We have had quite a bit of discussion on this, Mr. Mayor, and I do applaud your stewardship in keeping the meetings under control, and you've had judicious use of your gavel there and kept us all in line. So before we conclude this topic, I would like to thank you for your great ability to direct the meeting. And I've been clear on my position before, and I feel that it's a wrong decision, perhaps an unconstitutional decision to ban the gun show for several reasons. The first point that I'd like to make is not necessarily a constitutional issue, but Mr. City Attorney, am I correct in understanding that there are several cases before the Ninth Circuit involving the Second Amendment claims?
There are many cases in many circuits involving Second Amendment claims, none that I'm aware of particularly pertaining to a ban on possession and sale of guns on city-owned property or publicly owned property.
Okay. Oftentimes in these cases we get some dicta and we get some explanation that go beyond the core question, which shed light on some of the issues involving the Second Amendment and gun ownership. Isn't that correct?
It's correct that sometimes courts address issues not germane to the main decision, yes.
In fact, in looking back and researching this, we had Ms. Albuquerque here. She and perhaps your office also scoured a lot of the writing and the dicta in those opinions to see if there was any other direction that the courts were giving the lawmakers, so to speak. Is it a wrong idea to wait until the Ninth Circuit comes through on some of the cases that are currently before them on the legality of some of these Second Amendment issues?
Councilmember Jarian, in my view, that's a policy choice whether to wait. I think, as I explained last week, we think the weight of authority would uphold it. But again, because the law hasn't been established, we can't say that with certainty. The only way you get that certainty if there was an actual decision on this particular fact scenario where a public agency bans possession and sale of gun on his property.
Okay. My other point is essentially an objection to the findings which your office prepared, which perhaps, obviously you're urging the council to adopt them. Many of them are based on safety issues, accidental discharge of firearms, large-scale crimes and homicides in other parts of the country. And I think it's clear to point out that the final, and most recently on the heels of the Newtown massacre, if you will, I think that was maybe the stimulus to this. But it's unfortunate that the council has taken this step at this point before the investigation report has been concluded and has been released on the Newtown issue. What we do know is we have emotion with Newtown. We all feel very bad about that. And unfortunately, it's this type of emotion that's driving this council towards this ordinance. The other point that I have to make is at almost every opportunity, members of the public and members on this dais consistently repeated that the reason for this ordinance is the gun show is sending the wrong message. It is sending the wrong message. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but sending a message is freedom of speech. So at what point do we bestow upon ourselves the right to censor the messages that come out from folks that want to do the gun show? And I think that's wrong, because I think when this does go to trial, I think that the folks who are trying to protect the Second Amendment will go back and say all that the community members talked about and all that the majority of the council members spoke about was that it's sending the wrong message. It's sending the wrong message to the college kids. It's sending the wrong message to everyone else in the city. The issue wasn't this gun show has shown that there are crimes which are related to it. It doesn't show that there are illegal guns that are purchased there. It doesn't show that criminals are there committing crimes on the gun show grounds or in the Civic Auditorium. So I think that we have really made a wrong decision at this point. I think it's clear that this is completely an emotional reaction to what happened. The reasons that we're using to justify the gun show, at least what the decision makers have said, not your office. Your office is smart, and you know that you've got to put those well-founded findings down which relate to something other than the free speech aspect of it and the message aspect of it. But everyone here has said that it's a wrong message. Now, I wouldn't be surprised after making these comments, others fall in and say, oh, well, there's this safety issue and there's the accidental discharge issue and all that. But up to this point, the main issue has been that we're sending the wrong message. And folks, if we start censoring the messages that come out of City Council, that come from anything associated with the Civic Auditorium, we are going down the wrong path. And I really think we've got constitutional issues. Now, that's my opinion. I think a decision will be made at some point, either in someone else's case before the Ninth Circuit, or perhaps before our case if we end up litigating with Mr. Friesen. But I would urge my colleagues at this point to at least wait for the Ninth Circuit to come in so we have more clear direction as to what is legal, what is not legal, and perhaps save us all hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees that the losing party in this case is going to have to pay to the prevailing party. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Friedman.
I spoke last week about the reasons behind my decision, so I won't go into those again, but I will respond to my friend Mr. Najarian to say that I never spoke about sending a message. And in fact, when I did give my reasons for my decision, I did reference the findings that were made in the city attorney's report. I would like to read into the record a letter that we received through the city clerk from Jim Riggs, who's the interim superintendent and president of Glendale Community College. And that letter says, on behalf of the Glendale Community College Board of Trustees, I am pleased to notify you that on Monday, March 18th, 2013, the GCCD, which is the Glendale Community College District Board of Trustees, approved a resolution in support of school safety and in support of the Glendale City Council's efforts to adopt a city ordinance to permanently ban the sale of firearms on city-owned property. A copy of the resolution is attached. I'm not going to read the resolution, but I do want the public to know that the governing body of Glendale Community College has now weighed in support of the ordinance banning the gun show from the Civic Center. So I just want to make that clear to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have also not indicated anything about sending a message. I am firm in my commitment of prohibiting sale of firearms and ammunition across the street from schools, public places such as parks where kids frequent, many number of kids across the street from churches and colleges. So I said, we've all made statements before, twice, I believe, in 2 different public hearings. And as I said, I'm firm in my commitment to this cause, so I will support it.
Okay, I made a couple of comments, quite a few comments, previous to sessions, but let me say I support the findings. I think our legal staff as well as outside counsel have written a ordinance that I think is fair. And will it be contested by the NRA and by the gentleman that runs the gun show and firearms manufacturers? It could be. But I don't think a local jurisdiction, if we've reached a point in this country where a local jurisdiction cannot decide what goes into their civic auditorium or their parks, then we're in pretty sad shape. And in terms of emotions, quite frankly, I find a much more emotional response with the pro-gun lobby. Some of the speakers, not all, some, and also many of the emails that we received. Not that many from Glendale, but from other parts of California. I think this is a very emotional issue, and I think the reaction has gotten to the point where anything having to do with some semblance of municipal or state control over the sale and carrying of firearms becomes a constitutional issue. They're coming to get me. They're coming to get my property. You name it. I mean, it's just completely and utterly overblown in my opinion. I think Americans will continue to be able to carry firearms and to buy them. Certainly here in the city of Glendale, including the gentleman that just spoke, we have numerous. I mentioned it last week, all of the different firearm licenses, retail as well as manufacturers here in Glendale, Burbank, and the surrounding communities in Los Angeles. So like I say, I think we're well within our rights. But back to the emotion on the other side, I'll tell you what I'm emotional about. The fact that AK-47s, which killed some of my best friends in Vietnam, AK-47s, you hear people here on the podium and the emails, sell all the AK-47s you want in this country. And I tell you right now, there have been more Americans killed by that firearm than any other weapon. It's a Soviet and Chinese-produced weapon that has killed Americans all over the globe, and unfortunately now it's killing Americans here in this country. And I can also say that years ago in 1966, 1965, when I was in Vietnam, had I told all the guys in my infantry platoon that when you get back to the United States, yeah, there are going to be AK-47s all over the country, they wouldn't have believed it. I don't believe they would have thought for a minute that we would be allowing people to bring back. I assume not all of them are new. Some, in fact, may be at least years ago, could have been weapons that were reconditioned and sold on the general market that may have killed American servicemen in other countries. So, you know, the idea that there can't be any control, that you have to just kowtow to the NRA and the gun lobby, I disagree. This is an independent city. We're well within our rights to do what we did, and I'm very happy that we've taken this, what we're going to do. And do I think that this is a solution? Some of the emails that were received, no, this isn't the solution. This isn't going to keep criminals from acquiring weapons and and so forth. Absolutely not. But it's a small step. I think it's a good step. And hopefully there will be some balance in this country on this issue. Okay, we have a
there was a
motion and a second. Any other comments? Roll call.
Council members: Friedman?
Yes.
Manukian?
Yes.
Najarian?
No.
Weaver?
No.
Mayor Quintero?
Yes. Okay, next, please.
Next, under action items at 8A is Director of Community Development regarding initiation of zoning code amendment for increased consistency, clarity, and quality in Glendale's Planning and Neighborhood Services Division application review and regulatory process. 8A1 is a motion approving initiation of amendments as recommended by staff in Alternative 1. 2 is a motion approving initiation of amendments as modified in Alternative 2. 3 is motion approving the initiation of amendments as modified in Alternative 3. And 4 is a motion approving initiatives in amendments as modified in Alternative 4.
Yes, sir. Over the last year, we have spent considerable time going out and talking with lots of different stakeholders from across the community about how we as an organization are doing in meeting the needs of our customers, both residential and commercial, industrial, retail. One of the things that we have continued to hear, despite the refinements that have been made over the last several years, is that we are still somewhat difficult to do business with through our entitlement review process. And we have a very sophisticated, very mature retirement or entitlement review process. And it works pretty much as designed. But I think the time has come, especially as we've navigated the treacherous waters of the Great Recession, such that we know what our development services departments do very well and where their challenges are. And at this point, I have tasked Mr. Hagani and his team to look for ways that we can refine this process that protects and preserves the quality of life for our residents and businesses, yet still allows us to compete aggressively with the neighboring communities that would otherwise purloin our businesses and investment opportunities. So, with that, Mr. Hagani.
Thank you. Mr. Ochoa. This is, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're asking you to direct staff to initiate a process. We're not asking you to approve anything. There will be one administrative piece to this that if you choose, you can follow up as a council as I get to it. This is regarding Glendale's Planning Division application approval process, based upon a white paper prepared by Alice Grizel, who is a former community development director and who is very familiar with processes such as ours. This was an independent review by her, and she made some observations and made some recommendations. From that white paper, we have come up with an action plan that, if the council chooses, we can follow. The purpose... This can move. Okay. The purpose and theme of this proposal is to maintain consistency, clarity, and quality, and to introduce predictability and objectivity for applications and neighbors alike, and make our process understandable and efficient, and maintain the high-quality design for Glendale that residents and businesses have come to expect, that will protect all stakeholders. I must say that going back to 2007, we had an audit done by Matrix, and they made 2 recommendations that are relevant to what we're presenting tonight. One was to delegate design review of single-family additions to staff, and the other recommendation that they made, which is similar to what we're proposing, is eliminate one of the design review boards. The key goals are to streamline the processing time, maximize the efficiency of discretionary decision-making bodies. These are the bodies that hold public hearings to make discretionary decisions, simplify the process for applicants, and reduce subjectivity, and make a final decision more quickly and efficiently. There are issues there in the approach that action plan that we're proposing, and there's an approach and a methodology. I'm going to go through those with you. The issues are that at the moment we have multiple processes and we report to several review authorities. And our staff prepares layers and layers of reports. And then we have multiple hearings on one single application oftentimes. The approach we are taking is to maintain the status quo on significant projects. So nothing that we're proposing would affect the significant projects. We're starting at the lower level projects that we don't think the impact is that significant and the reaction is not significant. We're recommending eliminating unnecessary review authorities for less significant projects. We're recommending to increase staff's responsibilities to make fully noticed discretionary decisions without redundant public hearings. We're recommending that you retool the hearing authorities as appeal bodies to discretionary decisions made by staff. And then we're also recommending to adjust the submittal requirements to more reasonable levels. One of the complaints we get is that our submittal packets are very heavy burdens for some applicants. Okay, so you're helping me?
Maybe the city should invest in some new batteries?
Yes. Part of Ms. Grizel's recommendations addressed noticing. We are actually not making any recommendations to change noticing, and another piece that she recommended was consolidating some subdisciplinary focuses. We are not making those recommendations. We are still recommending to maintain the separation of zoning, design, and historic preservation in the process. The method, we have a two-pronged method. One is the set of administrative changes that do not require any code amendments. These could be implemented right away or soon, but staff will have to adjust the way we do the work to implement them. But then the set of adjustments would require council action through code changes, and they would require public input, which we would recommend to initiate. The administrative changes that would not require code amendments would be to eliminate one design review board. After the election, you will be able to appoint new boards, and the recommendation would be, instead of 2 design review boards, to only appoint 1 design review board. We think one single DRB can meet twice per month or less even. The current workload allows for this, and if the proposed amendments go through, even if the workload increases, we think 1 design review board can handle the workload. The streamlining of the code that requires code changes, the first one that comes to mind, and it's a very obvious one, is to eliminate the Environmental Planning Board altogether. This is a board that has 2 functions. One is to hear appeals by applicants when the applicant disagrees with staff's determination that a certain environmental document is required. For example, if the staff says an EIR is required and the applicant wants to say, no, I would like to do a mitigated negative declaration, they would appeal to this body. We have never had an appeal. We think if the appeal is necessary to exist, that appeal body could be the Planning Commission. The other function of the EPB is to meet every time an environmental impact report is going to be released. We think that's an unnecessary function that belongs to the ages that the departments did not work together. This is mainly a function of the city attorney, myself, and the public works director getting together and saying the EIR is ready to be released, and we can circulate it. And the second piece would be to replace hearings with modifications or administrative exceptions on certain discretionary permits, but continue noticing those decisions. That would mean, right now, staff can review with findings and approve up to 10% of modifications from numeric standards in the zoning code. Numeric standards except for floor area ratio and parking. We're recommending to look into expanding that to 20% of the standards, numeric standards, and include FAR and parking. This is, again, to be able to address things right at the counter when we're dealing with the applicants and take them in after a couple of weeks of review, being able to make a quick decision based on the code. And the benefits would be that it would cut review processing time by about 50% or more. We think it would cost significantly, cut down the cost for the applications and then reduce the need for a lot of the variances. We think by having the opportunity to apply for up to 20% of administrative exceptions, a lot of the applications that come for variances for a lot more modification would be reduced, because people would find it easier to ask for a little less than what they're asking today and then come under that threshold. I must emphasize that major conditional use permits would still require hearings. This would not affect that, and it would not impact quality because there would be findings associated with these. Before I get into the design review process, I must say that the last 5 years of staff preparing staff reports and working with the applicants and the design review board has brought invaluable experience for us that we can now take into consideration and start making decisions at the staff level. This is just a chart that shows that after working with the applicants and preparing a recommendation to the design review boards, what the design review boards have decided following staff's decision. If you look at the total cases at the very bottom, the different decisions. If you look at the last column to the right and look at the decisions that the design review boards together have made that have varied from staff's recommendation, you'll notice that more than 70% of the time they have followed exactly what staff has recommended. The 24% of the time that they have deviated, they have only added additional restrictions. They have only decided against staff's recommendation about 5% of the time. So 95% of the time they have done exactly what staff has recommended or a little bit stricter. That is a very high level of consistency with staff recommendations. This has given us a lot of experience in knowing what the design review board and what the community expect from these projects, and we think we can take that to the staff level and implement that at that level. What this would mean in terms of our recommendation is that we continue to recommend that DRB continues reviewing all new single-family homes, and the DRB would continue reviewing multifamily projects of 7 units and more, and mixed-use or commercial or industrial projects of over 10,000 square feet. The last category is consistent with what the City Council reviews in the downtown specific plan area and along the San Fernando Road corridor. Everything else under 10,000 square feet today in those areas is reviewed by staff, and we have had no problems. On the design review process by staff, we think staff should be given the responsibility to review and make fully noticed, I emphasize fully noticed, design decisions without public hearings on all additions and remodels of single-family homes and multifamily projects of up to 6 units and mixed-use commercial and industrial projects of up to 10,000 square feet or less. The way that this would work is that staff would put a notice up that the community has until such a date to give comments and come and review the plans, and after that date staff would render a decision. The decision would be noticed and there would be an appeal process after that.
On the remodels, so that could include a very extensive remodel when in fact you basically taking the house down to studs and
one of the things that we're recommending that we actually have in the code right now, and we would recommend continuing that, is that staff would have the authority to say if something is so extensive that we think from its level of significance it really merits going to a hearing, the staff could direct the applicant to go and apply for a fully noticed hearing by the design review board because of the level, the scope, and the significance of the work.
So the CDD director having the authority basically to punt the application to the DRB, we believe would actually further incentivize the applicant to stay within what would be an acceptable envelope for what the neighborhood has come to be.
But how are we going to codify that decision? I mean,
right now we have some measures at 50% or more demolition, but we actually can put in some additional language after having a discussion with the community that significant change to the architectural style or significant change to the massing. There are certain things we could identify that would inform the staff if these things are happening, even if you don't notice that this could become controversial. If these series of events are happening, then you should require them to go to the design review.
I think that's a good idea. Both the change in design and massing, both.
And one of the things that we would not change if staff is reviewing a design, we're still requiring the story poles even if they're being reviewed by staff, so that the community is aware of the same level of awareness and they can come and check the plans, but they can also see the historic bolts.
And by allowing the community to come to the counter, review the plans really at their own schedule within the review and comment period, I think actually, again, levels that playing field so that there is no added pressure to be there on that night for that hearing unless it's been appealed.
In terms of the historic preservation process, it would mirror the design review board process. The commission would continue reviewing all new buildings. Staff would review additions or remodels consistent with the guidelines and the standards that have already been established. Changes not meeting the Secretary of Interior standards should always be referred to the Commission. So small or large changes that would not meet the minimum Secretary of Interior standards would automatically go to the Historic Preservation Commission. And in terms of planning commission cases, subdivisions of 6 units or less could be reviewed by staff. All else
What is the, why 7 and 6? Why not
that is
8 and 7?
That's consistent with a threshold that's in the state code in terms of subdivisions.
It's a state code?
Right. We have been more restrictive than the state.
Do you know why the state has these numbers?
I don't really know the rationale behind it.
Interesting to know. Why isn't it 5 and it's 6?
It's 6. Up to 6 could be done at this level. I don't know where it came from. It may be because, like everything else in planning, that's the threshold that the community seems to be comfortable. A 6-pack on a small lot is acceptable, but
6-pack,
as we refer to those,
not that kind of 6-pack.
There you go. We'll go with the 6-pack.
Now, the last piece of this is streamlining the business registration and licensing. Right now, we have the zoning use certificate that every business in town, according to the code, has to come and get a ZUC, as we refer to it, zoning use certificate. And if the owner of that business changes, they're required to come and get a new ZUC. We are recommending to combine this with what we have, with a number of business licenses that we have, and also we're recommending to remove some of the restrictions that we have in the zoning code through the land use process, through conditional use permits, and deal with that through the licensing process instead. Let me just slowly get to this. First of all, we are not recommending to change the cost of the ZUC. We're recommending to maintain the fee for the ZUC exactly as is. We are, however, recommending to have a renewal at a very nominal fee, something like, less than $50, so that we can keep track of everything that's happening right now. We have no database for the businesses in town. We have no idea what industries are growing in town, what industries are leaving town, and we have no way of actually adjusting our economic development program accordingly. This will at least give us the chance to do that, and if people don't know that they need to get a ZUC, they will know because they get that notice from us. We think by replacing some of the land use permits with licenses, right now our land use permits are so restrictive because we're afraid of that one rogue business that will not fully follow the rules and regulations of the city. So we've come up with public hearings and a lot of review process for all businesses of that category. We think we could deal with that much more easily and in a more focused fashion by dealing with business registration licenses that, for example, if there is a nightclub operation that is required to have a business license for their manager, and the manager's background check has been done, and we have given that manager a license to manage that business. If there is a violation, we could take that away, and the business would not be able to operate until they hire another manager who gets a license from us, and that licensing process is a lot faster, so we're dealing with the issue at hand, the mismanagement of the business, and we're not dealing necessarily with that all those types of business are necessarily run badly.
And the renewal component is important for us too, because if we're going to allow greater flexibility on the one hand as a carrot for that business community, there has to be a stick by way of understanding what businesses may be coming in and taking over that recently entitled commercial property up to 10,000 square feet. So the idea here is the protection of the surrounding businesses and surrounding residents, quite frankly, that we know who is in that particular business at any given time. At this point, folks are supposed to come in and get that zoning use certificate. I can tell you that does not happen. with too much regularity. The idea of having this as a mandatory fee, I think, protects those folks that currently play by the rules and enforces a level playing field on those who don't.
And this would allow us to have, again, be more focused on the operation and the operator's performance, and easier to enforce and less costly to applicants. I must stress out that there is nothing about this that it's about generating revenue. It is really, and this is nothing new. We already have licenses for public dance, we have licenses for amplified sound or live music, and we have licenses for a number of activities. We're only asking to maybe add to those in lieu of going through the land use process.
There is a very strong sense of inertia that takes a hold any time that we start talking about revising the way that we do business, that we conduct business, particularly in the development services arena. And this notion of where you stand depends on where you sit is something that we deal with in real time. And I can tell you over the last 12 months, as I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of folks, oftentimes people who are vested in the system as it sits today are equally frustrated by that system when it's time for their project to come forward. When they see things that don't quite make sense to them, but it is the true and earnest application of our process. And so this notion of achieving balance becomes very important to us. We want to make sure that our processes are indeed value added. They're protecting both the business operator, the property owner, the surrounding property owners, the surrounding residents, but that they aren't unreasonably delaying the advancement of the activity, whether it's a home improvement, which is something we always like to see, people investing in their homes, keeping up their homes. But if we have a process that is unreasonably long or cumbersome, they will generally bypass us because they'll run the risk of getting caught versus coming through and operating within our process. This notion of accountability and stagnation is important to us as well because we do want folks to invest, whether it's commercial property or the residential properties, but we have to hold our staff and the business community accountable that what it is that we say we're going to build, we actually are building. And that leads to that final point on achieving quality outcomes. Whether we have a very exhaustive process or we have a very abbreviated process, I think that box score that Hassan showed shows that thanks to the effort and focus that we put on this entire system throughout the last several years, or the last 10 years really, we have an opportunity. We have the real opportunity to achieve high-quality outcomes, but I think now we're much smarter than what we used to be, and we have the opportunity to do it in a much more streamlined fashion. So, as I mentioned, this is this notion of evolution. I don't think that we could be here asking you to initiate proceedings in this arena if we had not gone through the process of the last 10 years, if we had not adopted other types of streamlined types of planning processes, a concierge level of service, and everything else that Hassan and his team have innovated over the last decade. We do have, as I said at the beginning, a very mature process. It's very sophisticated and isn't necessarily user-friendly to folks who are not used to hiring facilitators or hiring anybody other than their general contractor or trades person coming through to navigate our process. There is a better way that we can do it. I think that when you look at what we've been able to do in the downtown specific plan, and I'm not talking about the intensity of development, I'm talking about the streamlined process that facilitates that investment. When you look at what we've done in San Fernando or there in the downtown, the council has experimented and demonstrated that we can get those high-quality outcomes, protect the surrounding neighborhoods, and still do it in a way that makes sense for people to incentivize them to make those investments. I can tell you from a business perspective, we have dropped a great deal of staff in our organization, and all prospects are we are not going to restaff up, or at least even if we could add more bodies back, we might not add them back the way that they existed in previous years. What that means, however, is that there's still work that needs to get done. The applications, we owe it to our customers to move applications through the pipeline as quickly as we can, but if we operate in the way that we have in the past, things will undoubtedly stagnate and slow down. And so we're left with, again, this notion of balance. The Hippocratic oath of first do no harm is something that we take very seriously from a land use planning perspective, that we want to maintain high-quality neighborhoods and only add value to those neighborhoods. And we think that we have a great process. But as Will Rogers had once observed, that even if you're on the right track, you get run over if all you do is sit there. So for us moving forward, we're trying to look for those opportunities to maintain high-quality outcomes, but give that level of consistency and clarity, objectiveness and fairness to everyone that comes across our counter. In terms of timing, what we are looking for, because this is a long-range type of discussion. This system was built over a number of years. It will take at least a number of months to refine it and sand down those rough edges. We think that if the council is so inclined, after the election, when the council normally reappoints folks to different boards and commissions, we have the opportunity to, as Hassan said, to remove one of those DRBs almost as a pilot and see how that works. And we can also begin the outreach now, depending on what the council decides here tonight. Again, this is the initiation, not the conclusion of this process. We have spent a good deal of time talking to a number of our stakeholders, both business and residential, and we think that we can bring them together in an ad hoc fashion to help us understand what the details are on these checks and balances, this balance that we speak of. In terms of outreach, I can tell you that we would form an advisory group, that we would have a very wide cross-section of folks, as I've mentioned. We do want to have those kinds of discussions with people that have experience and expertise in those areas. If you don't do regular business with us, having a discussion about the inspection process might not make a lot of sense to you. If you're a homeowner who just is interested in what happens in their neighborhood, then there certainly is a discussion that we need to have and will have, but those aren't necessarily the same discussion. And we need to be able to make sure that we differentiate between those two. This is, as I say, an intermediate range discussion that has to happen. It won't go by very quickly, take at least 4 to 6 months, so I think there's no time like the present to begin. And we would then ultimately have to come back to the commission and to the council. But at the conclusion of that, we think that we would have a better, more cohesive process that provides better outcomes and is a better overall experience for the folks that choose to do business with us.
Friedman. Let's have a couple of questions before we go to the public. So going back to the DRB, so people get notice,
Yes.
the neighbors get notice, the HOAs get notice. If they object, does that automatically kick it back to the to a DRB, or is it, how would that work?
No,
or are
the
you
way
still
that it
working
would
out?
work, and as it is done, and actually some other cities do that, so if somebody has an issue, they would come and, because in the notice we would say, if you would like to discuss this or look at the plans, see such and such planner. And they would come and take a look at it, and they would express their objections or their issues. The planner would, at that time, have the opportunity to say to them, what if we put this condition on or that condition on? And through that interactive process, the planner would get a sense of where the community stands. If there is a reason to believe that we can address all those issues in a fair and even-handed manner, then we could render a decision and take all the comments into consideration, much in the same way we do right now in our staff reports to the hearing authority. That's exactly what happens. Staff writes those reports based on the input we get from the community and makes a recommendation. In that sense, instead of writing a recommendation to the hearing authority, then staff renders a decision. If then staff's decision doesn't go far enough, based on the public input, then it could be appealed, and the appeal process would not be cumbersome. I must say, though, that staff will be as interested in not having their decisions appealed as anybody else.
So for that applicant then that is applying for something that's only going to have a staff review instead of DRB, will their fees go down for that application?
Yes, the fees would be lower because there's no public hearing and there's no postage. There's not that kind of noticing. There will be some noticing, but not the same. And for that, based on the conversations, we could decide what that would be.
Okay, and then in terms of the business streamlining, which I'm happy to see, I want to be sure that this isn't a way of increasing fees to our businesses. So that's not what's going to happen here.
That's absolutely not.
Okay, I want to be sure.
We would only want to do the cost of administration of sending these computer-generated letters.
But the goal is, as I understand it, to actually lower a lot of the fees, because I know that some businesses now that have to come in for variances that can cost $10,000 might be able to get that taken care of just through this process without having to pay any additional fee.
Businesses and residents both, yes.
And we would hope that the businesses in question, wherever they may be, would be looking at, well, if I know what staff can approve as opposed to getting a variance, then I'll stay within that envelope, and that would theoretically, hopefully, our expectation is that would have a much less impact on the surrounding neighbors. Mm-hmm. So this system is designed in such a way that there is a consistent and dynamic balance.
Thanks. I'll have comments later, but I want to hear from you.
Okay, likewise. Any other
questions?
Okay. The number of speakers. Elisa as Marion, followed by Dennis DiPietro.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Quintero, council members, staff. My name is Elisa Asmorian. I am the past president. It's hard to say that, but I am the past president of 2012 and 2011 of the Armenian American Chamber of Commerce, Greater Los Angeles Chapter and Central Board. I am here with our Vice President, R.P. Castanyan, and our Board of Directors, Dr. Emil Avanes. We are here today to remove obstacles to conduct business in both commercial and residential development. We also support the research and the review that will be conducted by the community development in their efforts for renewing to improve zoning and permit process. We have utmost confidence in our new city manager, Mr. Scott Ochoa, and staff. We welcome check and balances system in order to protect the quality of life in Glendale. Thank you. We only have 2 minutes, guys.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mayor.
Give us your name for the record.
My name is Emil Avanes. I'd like to thank everybody for your time. I just want to go through three things. I come here with wearing three hats tonight. First, I wear a hat as a business owner here in Glendale, a fledgling business owner. I'm starting a practice called Harmony Health MD, and a lot of the issues that we were presented at our last meeting were very pertinent in my own practice, as I saw some of the difficulties that are faced by other business owners. And the most important things that I can see as needing improvement are we need some sort of standardization and some sort of streamlining in the process, so that people can have some level of predictability and also some sort of speed in with which things get conducted. So that's as business owner. Alisa already mentioned, as the Board of AACC, we are strongly in support of this measure. We had an extensive presentation where we had the opportunity to question each of the marks that were presented by Mr. Hagani. And there really weren't any breakdowns in there, and everything seemed to be holding strong. And then finally, as a physician, I see at the urgent care, I see a lot of families being faced with the need to reconsider their financial and economic viability. And the same should be true of our city. The status quo is no longer viable, and I think we really need to make an effort to change it.
We're about to run out of time, so why don't you fill out a card, and then I'll call your name, okay?
Okay, that's
I'm sorry.
okay. We just
No,
want
you
support. That's
can.
okay.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. You can speak if you like. You can fill out a card. Dennis DiPietro, followed by Laura Lasso.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. As current chairman of the board of the Glendale Chamber, and our president and CEO, Judy Kendall, is here as well, the board today reviewed the staff report that was online, and it supports the request by staff to initiate the zoning code changes, to review that. We understand that God is in the details here, and so we support this conditional to looking at those details and being involved in those details. So in that respect, the board certainly supports the purposes and the themes that are contained in slide number 2 that we saw. It understands and agrees to the issues that are described in slide 6. It understands and supports the administrative changes contained in slide 10. As the Glendale's advocate for business, and the Glendale Chamber Board is concerned about changes which would jeopardize Glendale's status of being business friendly. And we've had this discussion before, obviously, and so the issue about some of the issues brought in slide number 17. And finally, having the wonderfully diverse representation of businesses on our board, the board supports the staff request, again, conditional upon being really actively involved in that process with the advisory board in order to really ensure that the best of all of our abilities that we can fulfill these changes to satisfy the purposes and themes that are described in the staff report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura Lasso, followed by Ira Bland.
Good evening, Laura Lasso, Government Affairs Director for the 1,500 members of the Glendale Association of Realtors. I'm here with many of our leadership team here this evening because we believe this is a vitally important issue, and we thank Mr. Ochoa and Mr. Hagani for bringing this forward. Many members of our association have had clients who have refused to buy homes here because of the stories that they have heard of the entitlement approval process. Many of them have clients who would like to do work on their home and have spent many months in the approval process. This isn't right. The goal of the city should be to help homeowners improve their properties. If the process was made easier and shorter, homeowners would not be fearful of undertaking an improvement job, nor would they be fearful of approaching the city for those approvals. And gee, they might actually get a permit for the work that they do. As you know very well, property improvements increase property values, and in property values increase property tax revenues, which Lord knows all the cities need these days. We believe the City Council should move forward with discussions to streamline the entitlement process. The current system is cumbersome and often redundant. We may have some concerns going forward over specifics, but as talks move forward, we urge you to go forward with the Council, giving approval to staff to talk about streamlining and simplifying the approval process, and directing staff to appoint a task force to discuss recommended code changes, and, with hope, arriving at consensus to come back to you for further discussion. We would like to be part of such a task force. We think it should be made up of realtors, architects, builders, developers, homeowners, and business owners. So we urge you to move forward with the study of streamlining the entitlement process with appointment of this task force, and also for giving staff a specific time frame in which to report back to you, so that this just doesn't languish in Neverland forever. We are hopeful that Glendale will see some real change and that some real improvement to the entitlement process is made. Thank you very much.
Ira Bland.
Good evening. My name is Ira Bland. I'm the current president for the Glendale Association of Realtors, and I just wanted to reemphasize that we are enthusiastically in favor of this effort for streamlining the process and creating a task force to achieve the goal of making these improvements. And as Laura Alasso had said, we encourage wide and a diverse group of people to participate besides the realtors. Contractors, architects, property owners, whether they be residential or commercial, because all of them have a stake in what the outcome will be. And I believe everybody wants to make the improvements and improve the city overall. We think that the process will not only improve the end result and the goal, but we think there's also an opportunity for some cost savings in the city operations, and also that more people would be willing to come forward and ask for permits. People like to do the right thing, and as long as it's an easy process and it's fair and equitable and enforced consistently, we believe people will come forward more often and do just that. So we look forward to helping in making these changes possible to create a win-win proposition for the city, its residents, and its business owners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's the final card. Comments or questions? Mr. Weaver.
I'll be kind of short. In all my decade-plus time here, that's one of the common themes I've got. I don't care to do business in Glendale. It's too hard. I don't care to deal with your staff. And one thing after another, and all I can say is, well, I know we're going to work on it. I know we're going to work on it. And not to put down anybody in particular or staff, but the credibility of the planning department is much greater today than it's ever been. That's my perception of what council thinks of what Mr. Agani is doing. Between Mr. Cho and Mr. Agani, it's now going to see a light of day. I hope it's not too long getting out, because we owe it to everybody in this city, or potentially those that want to come to this city, to streamline things. Taking some steps in the downtown specific plan to make things much easier, and we constantly get compliments on that. But there's a lot more to do, and you are the experts out there on what we'd like to see and what things you'd like to have changed. So I'm all for that. The one side benefit that I think has not been mentioned, Mr. Choi, if we license everybody, then won't we know what businesses are where in this city? So we can plot on a map where all these different types of business, are they congregated in one particular area? Are they spread out all over? Do we have the right mix? That would be something of value to staff in looking. The only way I knew that that happened in the past, and I will only use the term once, and I don't mean it, business license tax, then you knew where everybody was. We can do that with a simple license of all the businesses, and I think that'll be a big side of value to us. So, when you want to do it, I'll just go with what the staff has recommended for now and let you all decide what it should end up being.
Friedman.
I'm glad to see this come forward. We have to streamline our processes, both for people that have real estate and homeowners, as well as for the businesses. I'm certainly not in favor of a business license tax, but I do think a mechanism by which we can track our businesses, but also help our businesses that won't cost our businesses money is what I'm looking for. And I'll give you an example. Mr. Ochoa and I had a woman in our office yesterday. She had a very nice little store. She did a consignment and gift shop, and she wanted to put things outside because she had a very teeny little shop with a very large outdoor area that was empty. And everybody agreed that putting these products outside looked lovely. It enhanced the neighborhood. It enhanced her shop. But for her to be allowed to do that legally, she would have had to have a variance that would have cost $10,000. $10,000. And because that variance would go with the property, we probably wouldn't want to give it, because the next business that came in might have been selling something really tacky and really horrible, and because this particular business was it was in a single-family neighborhood, there would be a lot of concern about what would replace her business. My understanding is that we can, with this, the way that they're looking to craft this, that business person could have come to the city and they could have just issued them a license to have that kind of business and to put their products outside. That could be renewed every year. So if she changed her business model and all of a sudden was selling something that everybody in the neighborhood hated, they could deny that license, but it would be something that would cost, I don't know.
Considerably less.
Considerably less, $100 as opposed to $10,000. It would have allowed her the flexibility to do this business that really enhanced the neighborhood and protected the neighborhood from any subsequent business or change in her business. And that's what I'm really looking for, is something that gives our businesses flexibility. Because every case is different, and if we can look at each business and say what they're doing is not detrimental to anyone around them and it helps the business, it helps our community, we should be able to do that. While we're looking at this, I would like us to look at as well some sort of license to allow small venues to have very small live musical performances, and we've talked about this before, without them having to go through the process of getting a performance permit. It was brought to my attention by one of our lovely wine shops that they had a guitar player and they'd have 10 people listening to the guitar player. Guess what? We don't allow that without a public performance license, which costs a couple $1,000s and has to be renewed. Again, it's that flexibility that I'm looking for. When we think something's reasonable, we can at least let them try it and see how it works before we say no. I'd like us to be able to say yes more often and to help our businesses. So if we could look at that little area along with others that we may have heard of, because we certainly, our businesses deserve us giving them the ability to be flexible, to move their businesses forward, and we too often are not flexible enough. In terms of the real property and the design review boards, I think we need to go carefully, but we can certainly move forward. I was a design review board commissioner for 5 years, and there were certainly projects that came in front of us that didn't have to come in front of us. And these poor applicants had to pay thousands of dollars for something that we would sit there on the board and say, really? We're going through all of this for them to put 2 windows on the side of their house? You know, there's got to be something reasonable here. So let's put together a good task force, the realtors, the homeowners associations, the businesses, and I think we can all, I'm sure, come up with a lot of great improvements to our processes. So thank you all for coming today.
When you talked about performance licenses, I remember. Do we allow dancing in Glendale now?
Yes, we do.
We didn't used to. I remember.
It's not permitted by right.
Okay, so they still have to go through the process to allow dancing. So we don't allow dancing in Glendale at this point. And I remember having a variance hearing actually for a Carousel restaurant for them to allow to have dancers at the restaurant, which was odd for me. But that was the process back then. And is it still the process if they want to have a dancer or dancing in a venue in the downtown strategic area, downtown strategic plan area?
They're depending on where in the downtown are, there are actually easier ways to do it now. You can do it through an administrative process.
Well, this is certainly, I think, a great step in the right direction. I want to commend City Manager, Mr. Ochoa. I also want to commend you, Mr. Hagani, for taking this step. Some of the things I don't agree with, but I do agree that the initiation of this process is due. Time is way past. I think some of the goals that you have set are certainly worthwhile, and some of the things that we've been hearing over the many years about the processes in the city. And the suggestion made by the Board of Realtors in terms of setting a time so that this thing comes back, I would like to set April 2nd, the time, so this kind of comes to council before the election, so that we can all at least vote on it. But one of the things that concerns me is licensing the managers. I think the state of California has certain professions where licensing is permitted, and I don't know how that would work and what kind of problems it would cause. It's just a red flag for me when we talk about licensing managers and professionals. I think that item should be vetted out much more in detail. Initially, I was opposed to having any kind of fees for businesses, but considering that we do have the ZUCs currently, and they should all be registered anyways, I think instead of having a ZUC, having a business registration and not a license but a registration, that is okay. I think I could be talked into supporting that, depending on how it would be administered and what kind of resources it would take from the city. In addition, or much less than what we are devoting now in terms of the ZUCs. I did get one ZUC actually from the city, and it took me a few hours to get it. It was a very simple issue, but it still took a considerable amount of time, considerable work on behalf of staff actually, because they had to go back and research all the old businesses that were in that location and then come back and say, okay, it's okay. One thing I would recommend also is key performance indicators at the end of this process. I think it's important to set the key performance indicators. When we're talking about streamlining processing times, I think we should determine how long it's taking now and how long it's going to take after. after these processes are concluded and initiated. Same thing with making final decisions, and I'm looking at slide 4, more quickly and efficiently. I think that could be turned into a key performance indicator. Reducing subjectivity, I think, is important as well. There should be guidelines and some sort of control in terms of the decision-making by staff or anyone else that deals with the public. And on slide 11, we talk about the benefits where it says cut review processing time by about 50%. I think that should be a key performance indicator. And some of the other items in there as well. Cuts down the cost and complications of the applicant. Certainly, key performance indicator would be cutting down the cost. How much is it costing now and how much it would cost then, and whether that is maintained throughout the process. I think those are certainly worthwhile goals. So I'm in favor of moving forward. And again, I want to thank all the chambers that came out: the Board of Realtors, the Armenian Chamber, the Glendale Chamber. I didn't see any homeowners here, but I hope they will. I know they are very much interested.
Yes.
You have met with them and discussed with different groups?
With several of the HOAs.
That is appreciated as well. So I think this is it's time for this to happen. And again, I want to commend Mr. Ochoa and Mr. Hagani for their leadership on this item. So.
Thank you. I do very much support this. The themes and purpose are items that the community has been demanding for quite some time. I want to make sure that the outreach group is sufficiently broad to encompass all possible stakeholders. And let's get to it. I mean, I want to see the language to the ordinance. This is all very good, rah, 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 but the devil is in the details in this sort of process. So I know you're working hard. You've got a good idea as to where you're going to go. And without committing too deeply to any particular point that is raised, I'd like to see the actual proposed language and the comments from the stakeholders before we start to ink this deal. So, but I think it's a great step in the right direction. I fully support it, and maybe we'll have some more positive change from the planning department.
I also support the intent, and the devil will be in the details. I think generally speaking, in terms of the business community, we have to come up with newer solutions or better solutions. So I'm convinced there. I guess where I kind of am a little hesitant is going to be in the single-family neighborhoods, where I don't want to see a repeat of the issues that took place years ago, where we basically have homes that are destroyed, rebuilt, out of control type of situations, and entire neighborhoods are inflamed when that happens. So I'm sure that there'll be enough homeowners represented in the groups. But in the business areas, we absolutely have to do something. It just takes way too long to get a business situated here in the city of Glendale, across the board, whether it's in San Fernando Road or the downtown. So I support the intent. Looking forward to see what the results are.
Want a motion? Move 8A1.
Second.
Any other comments? Roll call.
Council members: Friedman.
Yes.
Anukian.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next, please.
Next, under hearings, at 9A is Director of Community Development regarding Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for property located at 341 West Dorn Street. 9A1 is resolution designating property as historic resource and authorizing Mills Act contract.
Jay, are we taking these in tandem? Are we taking these together or in tandem?
It's easier to take them together.
Good. If that pleases
you
the
like me to
council,
read
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening. This is an unusual Glendale Register nomination hearing in that. Oh.
Artie, do you want to read both of them into the record?
Okay.
Did you?
Sure. I can read that. 9B is Director of Community Development regarding Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for property location at 343 West Dorn Street. B1 is resolution designating property as historic resource and authorizing Mills Act contract.
If you open the hearing on both, Mr. Mayor.
I'll open the public hearing.
Okay. As I was saying, this is a very unusual kind of Glendale Register nomination hearing because we're looking at a fantastic project that I think the council and people in Glendale really love, the Duran Gardens project, which involved the saving of 3 Craftsman bungalows, incorporating them into the project, and then restoring them, as you can see in this slide, to make them kind of shine as focal points of the development. I think it's pretty safe to say that almost any other developer would not have been able to save these buildings, and we can be really grateful that this happened. There are many historic merits to the project, so the question is, why did the Historic Preservation Commission vote to deny the Glendale Register designation and Mills Act application for both of the houses, which you can see
Working?
all right. There, I got it.
Got it? Yeah, there you go.
Oh, you have, I'm sorry.
I don't know what side it works, it's just the wrong.
So among the historic merits besides saving the 3 houses is that most of the work on each of the houses, and there are the two westerly houses, 343 and 341 West Doran, are the 2 in question for the nominations tonight. 339 is under separate ownership, and if the council decides to designate these 2 houses, it's likely that the 3rd will come forward sometime in the near future. Most of the work on the projects meets the Secretary of the Interior standards, which is kind of our benchmark in preservation for what we think is an acceptable level of change that can be brought to a historic structure and still have it be eligible for designation at the local level. And so the commission was kind of torn in its 3-1 vote to deny the projects. And I just wanted to show the council the 2 issues that they focused on in their denial before the developer from Historic Housing Partners, Heritage Housing Partners, comes up to make his presentation. What we have here are before and after pictures of the 2 houses, before at the top, after at the bottom, obviously. This house had a non-original condition at the porch. It originally had an open porch, which was restored as part of the project. It had been infilled at some point and stayed that way for many years, so this is another aspect of returning the porch was a good thing in terms of historic preservation. The issue for the commission really hinged on 2 things on both of these houses, changes to the roof structure and changes to the foundation of the building. So in this original, the before photo, you can see this red line indicates where the roof, how it related to the wall. And if you picture this having columns that supported the porch, the roof over the porch, they would have been tucked under the eave right there. You can see the blue line represents the new eave line versus the red line of the historic eave line. It may seem like a small difference, but in preservation circles, in the preservation world, it actually violates 4 of the 10 standards of rehabilitation from the Secretary of the Interior and changes the kind of balance of the composition of the house. It makes the roof kind of look like it floats and makes the house a little more top-heavy than it originally was. The same is true of 343 Duran. Here's the before and after. Here's the eave line where you can see its relationship to the original porch columns. Here you can see the new porch columns and the section of wall that separates the kind of beam across the columns with the new roof line. Recently, the council changed our designation criteria and added a 5th criterion, which the 2 buildings were nominated under. It asks that Glendale Register properties exemplify the early heritage of Glendale if they're to be listed. The commission recognized all of the benefits of this project and was having trouble making a finding under that criterion because of the level of changes that had been made to the houses, and they felt that they could no longer meet that criterion. The other change, briefly, is just changes in the foundation height. I don't think the commission was quite as concerned about this as it was about the changes in the roof structure, but it's a little hard to see here, but there are little red lines showing the lower height of the foundation of this house, the higher height of the restored version, and that just places the building up higher off the ground, and craftsmen are known to be kind of ground-hugging. It's a kind of a ground-hugging style of architecture. Same thing happened at 343 West Duran. So that concludes my presentation of the two sides. The staff report reflects both sides. We see the historic merits, but we wanted to indicate why the commission voted 3-1 against designation.
Ms. Friedman.
I have two questions. My first question is, I'm sure that you or HPC saw the plans going into construction. So were they ever told that the construction with regard to the roof might jeopardize their ability to get to be listed?
Yeah, the original plans didn't show the changes to the roof, and we were never notified about it. It was evidently made in the field. It was based on the idea that I should have mentioned this, at the house at 343, it was having a second story added in the former attic space. And when they realized that they were putting people in that space and they went up there, it wasn't really big enough.
So I'm curious. So we thought going in that these houses might be historic, correct?
Yes.
So building and safety allowed them to make such a major change without kicking it back to any review from HPC or from you?
Yeah, the architectural drawings were never changed. I assume the structural drawings must have been re-reviewed, but we never saw those.
So, Mr. Hagani, I mean, shouldn't someone at the building and safety who signed off on those changes, shouldn't they have realized that this was a potentially historic property and at least let Jay review the changes?
I guess that question presupposes that all of that is obvious to a plan checker that is reviewing something from a completely structural standpoint. We have trained our inspectors to recognize those changes, but these types of changes to a structural engineer are very minute and not necessarily indicative of a red flag of historic, and they may or may not have been aware that these could be historic. So I cannot speak on that, but I can tell you that I could follow up on that. But
with our properties that are on the historic register, or I don't know about ones that are in the districts, but certainly something that's on the historic register, we need to flag those if they undergo any sort of
those ones are.
Because if this happened with a project that was already on the register, that could really be a problem.
That wouldn't, because the properties that are on the register are already flagged in our system.
What about ones that have been surveyed as being eligible for listing?
I think Jay might be.
So surveyed properties aren't flagged.
Because we probably should. Those are the ones that tend to be threatened, not the ones that are already listed.
I'm not sure if this was in the DSP survey, so it wouldn't have.
It was not in the DSP survey, and then the other the question, that's a big question. That is really about whether or not we have an up-to-date survey, and if any survey is recognized as a survey that should be put on the. That's a policy issue that we can have that conversation. In the past, we've asked to do complete citywide surveys, except that that's not from a budgetary standpoint, it's not really doable at this moment.
At some point, I think we should talk about just the properties that we know that we have surveyed in the past, properties that have come to our attention, because they're out there, and I think we know what a lot of them are. And this would be an easy way for somebody to take a property that we think is historic and make it unhistoric.
I understand.
Without doing an EIR, which is what we would normally require in that instance, whether it's listed or not. So that's not something that's a concern for me. But let me move on. So my other question is, well, I guess I still don't quite understand whether the owners thought that they would be jeopardizing any listing by doing this, but maybe we can ask them that. And then secondly, outside of practical considerations, Jay, in terms of, they saved these, and so we want to give them the reward of the Mills Act, if these had just come in as they are, without any of that background, would you really consider these to be landmark-worthy homes?
Yeah, that was an issue from the beginning. When we had our former criteria under the previous ordinance, we really had trouble thinking that we can make a finding under the architecture criterion, given that we have high expectations for Glendale Register properties in the city. When we were considering making global changes to the ordinance and came to the part where we thought about the designation criteria, Criterion 5 gave us an opportunity to recognize kind of early craftsman heritage. That was kind of in our minds. Projects like this were in our minds as we were thinking about that. And we thought it could give us an opportunity to incentivize development that saved buildings like this, but also in some cases let individual buildings be designated that gave us a real glimpse of early Glendale without necessarily being the great architectural specimen.
Any other questions? No? All right, I have a speaker card. Charles Loveman.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Charles Loveman. I'm the executive director of Heritage Housing Partners. We're the developer of this project. I do have a PowerPoint that I think was... Sure. Thank you. As Mr. Platt explained, Doran Gardens was developed by Heritage Housing Partners, and as part of the project, we saved a group of 3 1910s bungalows that we believe exemplify the early heritage of Glendale. We believe that this bungalow grouping does, in fact, embody the purposes of Criterion 5 of your amended ordinance, and we respectfully request that the council approve our Landmarks app and our Mills Act application. Let me just briefly walk you through the chronology of this project with respect to these 3 bungalows. It all started in August of 2004 when city staff contemplating developing this site hired a consultant who found that these 3 bungalows were eligible or potentially eligible for local listing. That consulting report set in motion a whole process that when we moved forward in front of this council and the Housing Authority in 2005 with our DDA, the DDA required the preservation of those 3 units, those 3 bungalows. As you may all recall, the project sort of went in suspense for a few years while the Pasadena phase was completed, and then starting in 2009-2010, activity started in earnest. We started meeting with the city staff in 2009 to indicate our interest in getting those 3 bungalows listed and applying for Mills Act. And at about that same time, city staff, and I think Jay just spoke to it, started to contemplate on their end an amendment to the Landmarks Ordinance to include a new category for historic resources that exemplify the early heritage of the city. That new ordinance was adopted, or the amended ordinance was adopted about 6 months ago. And the primary feature from our perspective was Criterion 5, a criterion for listing as a landmark, to give the Historic Preservation Commission flexibility in recognizing the contribution of early vernacular structures. And this is the quote, this is one of the quotes from the 2004 consultant report, but we certainly believe that these 3 bungalows met the test of Criterion 5. The other aspect of Criterion 5, it states in the staff report to the ordinance that many of these early vernacular structures do not have to meet the highest preservation standards that would be required from the other criteria in that ordinance. So while the staff was in their process of amending the ordinance, we were busy getting our building permit, we were busy building the project, and among the many things that we did was we did in fact raise the roof height 14 inches to accommodate converting the attic to a second floor to living space in response to requirements from building and safety about structural upgrades so we could occupy the second floor. We came back in November of 2012 after the amended ordinance had been approved by this council and submitted our Landmark and Mills Act applications. And then we went in front of the Historic Preservation Commission in December of last year. As you know, they recommended against approval, saying that architectural integrity had been lost. We argued that the building alterations we felt were minimal and were certainly within the flexibility that Criterion 5 allowed. Commission members, as Jay has pointed out, were particularly concerned about the roof height and that they felt that it compromised the craftsman integrity. We weren't prepared for that comment at that hearing, but since then we went out and researched a bunch of local examples of roof heights that do not sit on the porch beam but float above the porch beam, as these photos show. So in conclusion, we saved these 3 bungalows, and we certainly hope that the council agrees that this embodies the purpose of Criterion 5. Thank you.
You haven't sold any of them yet, is that correct?
We sold the first one, which is why it's not part of the application.
Okay. And so there would be a financial advantage to having this Mills Act for the new property owners, right?
Absolutely.
Any questions?
How long have they been on the market? I know we had the opening about 6-7 months ago, didn't we, for Dorn Garden?
We got our these are part of Phase 1. We got our Phase 1 approval in late August.
Okay, and it is your intention to sell them? You don't want to lease them?
Oh, no, we're going to sell them.
Definitely going to sell them.
We're going to sell them.
No, I remember this project clearly. It was early on, and I mean, with all due respect to Heritage Housing, we're the ones that said you have to save these homes.
Fair enough.
And of course, you adopted that in your development agreement. They're really nice homes on the inside. I mean, they're beautiful homes. My problem is I don't see them as having that historic flavor to them. It's a difference between a restored Corvette and an original, a survivor Corvette, where yes, the pieces are there and it looks great and it may even be better than the original, but it's lost some of the original, the patina and the did you catch that, planning staff? The patina. I got a few planning terms, and the windows are new, the floors appear new, the roofs are new. They're beautiful homes, but I'm having a little bit of a hard time convincing myself that they deserve the Mills Act designation. How come there's not buyers lined up around the block for these things? Because the housing market is crazy in town. These are beautiful homes.
We just put the last two, the 341 and 343, under contract last week.
How much are they enlisted for? Can we talk about that?
$1.5 million.
Can we talk about that? I mean, just this is their chance for a plug. I mean, unless your realtor objects, or is the realtor? He might claim.
The one to the west, 343, is under contract at $601,000.
Are you kidding me? That's a bargain.
Good.
I'm telling you, that's.
Are we on TV?
600? How much? 601,000?
601.
Oh my God.
And 341 is under contract for 540.
Oh, come on. Get out of town. I don't know if anyone's been in the housing market, but I have been, and these homes are worth at least $200,000 on top of that, in my opinion. No, I'm telling you, when this hits, you're going to have people fighting.
Make an offer.
I don't know if I may have a conflict at this point. But they are beautiful. I think they really represent the craftsman architectural style. But are they super special enough to get the Mills Act? I don't know if I could go that far with it.
The only thing I can say is that I'm not sure that there's been another project that's come forward under Criterion 5. And so we're the first one. There's not really a precedent by what the language of the amended ordinance says about flexibility and so forth. So we understood that these were not architectural needs. They never were. We had a long conversation with staff many times, and the outcome of that was staff's desire, I'm sure, on behalf of other projects as well as this property, to amend the ordinance to encompass this kind of thing. So we agree. This is not the Gamble House.
Well, I personally will be, you can sit there in the front row if you want, I don't have any questions if anyone else has. I personally would support the Mills Act. I think looking at the totality of what you've done, and like Mr. Najarian, I've been in the project, both the condominiums and the single-family homes. I think you've done a great job, and I think there are some alterations that perhaps are different. And as he mentioned, that's a good analogy, actually. A Corvette or any other period car, whether it's an original shape or it's had some modifications. But all in all, I think it's a good idea. I think it makes sense to encourage this type of development. So I support it. Mr. Manukian.
I will not support it. I will support the Historical Preservation Commission. I defer to them on matters of historical significant buildings and And it seems to me that these buildings were significantly modified where there is no flavor of the original building, so I will not support it.
Okay, Mr. Weaver.
Well, over the years here, I know I've looked at many historic buildings up for designation, beautiful ones, but they're almost all in the original way they were when they were built. Deco art or whatever, everything original, hardly anything revamped. These are very well done and stuff, but it's hard for me to now say they're historic because so much has been rebuilt in it. It's not like seeing the original homes that we've seen so often up here. Using the designation of a car, I have in my garage 1940 Ford that I rode in when I was a baby. It has the original paint job, has mohair seats inside. I entered in cruise night, and it won first time out for ancient car, what do you call it? The old cars. And I've seen many 40 Fords totally restored, beautiful paint jobs and everything. But to me, I'd look at that and say, well, sure don't look historic. You can look at my car and say it is historic, original paint job, everything, from that far back. I understand what Mr. Najarian said. That's a good analogy. I just can't see how I can say that these now are historic. I mean, there's a lot of other craftsmen in town. I can think of one that's 2 blocks away from here now, but I wish someday somebody would put up for a historic designation that looks the way it was 40, 50 years ago at least. So I have the trouble looking at the old pictures and the new and then saying it's historic. I just can't do it. I just can't.
Well, as long as we're making an analogy about cars, remember,
Yes.
there are cars that are period correct. So you can take your 1940 Ford
Yes.
that I've seen, that is a classic, a coupe, actually,
Yep.
and you can use the right lacquer paint, you can use the right bolts, you can generally find the type of material that they used for the seats, and in fact, that would be a period correct 1940 Ford.
Let me give an example. The windows are cracked on it.
You can
When
find the old style
I went to replace
windows.
it, and they said it would decrease the value of the car if I replaced those windows. Down in the little corner is a little Ford stamp on each window. It says don't replace it, so I have the windows that are cracked.
Well, but if you went to the right place, you'd have to pay more, but you would get
Well, I went
type
to
of...
custom
that
place
type
that have
of...
it done.
all right, we're,
That's what they told
we're
me.
digressing here.
Yeah, we're
Anyway,
digressing.
Ms. Friedman.
Well, I think this is kind of a tough one, to tell you the
Yeah, it
truth.
is.
I understand the HPC's recommendation, and in fact, I spoke with one of the commissioners about it. Although I think that Mr. Platt, as the historic preservation expert, he's really the final word on what does fall under the Department of the Interior standards for a historic renovation and that still keeps something historic. So I put a lot of weight in him saying that he thinks this still meets that criteria. But what I guess I'm grappling with on the side of the applicant, by the way, is if we didn't think that these buildings were historic, why was the applicant required to save them in this project? Why didn't we just say, go ahead and knock them down and build whatever, build your beautiful project right up to the street? Why would we force them to retain these properties if they didn't have some sort of historic value? And it seems to me that criteria 5 does speak to exactly this type of situation of something that is more vernacular, but also harkens back to a piece of California history. And I'm glad to get more explanation and to see that change in ordinance work, because I do think this is exactly the kind of situation that was referring to. And I also think that his demonstration of the different heights of different craftsmen gives me a little bit more confidence. So I understand HPC's rationale. I may have made the same decision as them, but I think looking at it into the broader context, especially wondering why, I wasn't here when this project was first approved, but I would ask my colleagues who were, If we didn't think these were historic, then why did we make them save them? And then if Mr. Platt says that he still thinks they're historic with these renovations, because again, houses are living creatures in a way, and when they do move through history, there are things that have to be renovated, and these are not museums, these are houses to be lived in. So, certain changes can, still be appropriate. So I'm leaning towards the side of going ahead and approving them for landmark status and for Mills Act protection.
I feel the same way. Any other comments?
Perhaps just one other thing to consider is sometimes, particularly in transition neighborhoods and transition by way of the urban edge into more suburban single-family neighborhoods, sometimes a Mills Act contract can make a significant difference in the saleability of a property like this. One thing the council may want to consider is if these properties were to fall out of escrow because there was no opportunity for property tax savings vis-a-vis a Mills Act, then conceivably you're left with two under the action of the council would be deemed faux historic homes that would basically sit vacant, sit fallow. And that I don't think serves anybody, certainly not the city, certainly not the developer, and not the neighbors who would otherwise have new neighbors to help preserve their neighborhood. Whether he wanted to or not, Mr. Loveman has indicated to you what his sales prices are, which I think was probably something he didn't expect to do tonight. But if the council is thinking, if the majority of the council is thinking that you would not approve a Mills Act under what you've seen based on the arguments that have been raised, maybe it's something you want to think about from the standpoint of reflecting on what the sales prices are as they've been quoted, and if Mr. Loveman, as he has a willing buyer and he's a willing seller, if they're willing to hold on to those terms, that might be something that would trigger the approval of a Mills Act contract, as opposed to any kind of appreciation. If those prices went up, then perhaps Mr. Najarian's comment about the property being worth considerably more and the properties themselves having greater intrinsic value, perhaps that Mills Act contract isn't essential to the preservation of these properties. But if the price has been set and those terms are honored, maybe a Mills Act contract could be warranted as a way to preserve these structures. And again, I'm only raising that point. I would not presume to weigh in on the council's own deliberations as a policy matter, except for the, again, rather unprecedented, unexpected.
Sounded like you're weighing in. I appreciate your comments.
Only
to
the extent that Mr. Loveman gave you what his number was, which I wouldn't have expected that he would do that. But it lets you know where that market is.
Why don't I go ahead and move the item and we'll see where it goes?
Okay. Is there a second? Doesn't sound like there's a second. I will pass the gavel. I'll second the motion. Any other? Well, you're running the meeting.
Which one are you moving?
I just want to make a comment that my decision is based on the individual that I appointed to the HPC and the other individuals who are more knowledgeable about historic homes than I am. Historic issues that deal with this with the Mills Act, and based on their vote and their opinion, these buildings are significant, although very nice buildings. These buildings are significantly altered, therefore not meeting the requirements of a historical building. And based on that, I will be voting no on this item.
So you're moving 9A1 or both of them?
Both of them.
You're going to move for approval. That's the motion. That's the second. And I would like to point out that there are realtors across the city that would die to have their homes in front of the on Channel 6 for the length that these have, and bestowed with the compliments and the analysis that the council has.
They'll sell quick now.
Roll call, Mr. Kasakian.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
No.
Najarian,
No.
Weaver,
No.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Motion fails. What's next, Mr. Kasaki?
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited time, is not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. City manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
All right, John Rando, followed by Timothy Catledge.
Hello, Council. I'm still John Randall. I'm still living in Glendale, believe it or not. As for local jurisdictions, it was the Nazis, the communists, NAMBLA, and other groups that I personally consider freaks of nature and genetic mistakes. They get to march, speak, etc. on city streets and property, and no, we don't get to say no. As much as we like to set certain standards for our city, and we've been discussing that over the gun show, etc., there's always those who are going to seek to lower them. And yes, I would like to say no to some of those groups that I mentioned, but it's not right. It's always better to see evil in the light and those who follow it rather than keep it in the shadows. As for FFLs, in the city of Glendale, the majority of those are called CNR licenses. That means they're curio and relic licenses. Those are for people collecting older guns. That the last gun show, the ATF was trying to get people to get those if they wanted to. Lugers, Maugers, P-38, AK-47s didn't necessarily kill people, but the people wielding them did. Those are people who felt passionately, no matter how wrong they were and how wrong I feel they were about their country and ideals, and yes, they did kill our soldiers and families. As for the AK-47, Mayor Quintero, I personally feel it should be gone. It's a crappy gun, not very accurate, and that's probably the best reason for getting rid of it. We've talked about Newtown here quite a bit lately, and the latest thing that's come out is in Newtown. Adam Lanza suffered from a mental illness that they now know, and it's been shown in every mass killer to date. It's one characterized by a desire to imitate others who have gone before you by doing mass killings, to be famous by killing others, and and they also see their actions as heroic. This is for all the people who have kids out there. Adam Lanza had a 7-foot by 4 foot. Think how big Shaquille O'Neal is, 7 feet by 4 foot. Document pasted together of 8.5 by 11 sheets of computer printed out paper in a 9 font. You all have computers. Do you know how small a 9 font is? 7 feet by 4 feet in his room. His mother never even bothered to look at it. Adam Lanza his failure was basically his mother's. She did nothing. So when we try to do things for our society and want to make this place safer, we also need to pass on to parents, you really are responsible for your kids, and you need to take a lot more interest in them than they do nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Timothy Catledge, followed by Alan Navasartian.
My name is Tim Catledge. I'm here as a whistleblower against one of the biggest, I say, huge faction that affects the city, Glendale, all the other states, the whole world, in fact. This belief that that we are ruled by this deity, that whatever name you want to call it, God, Yahshua, or Yahweh, or whatever you want to call it. And over the years, I've been observing this as I've been growing up, and all I see is that they're using this as a scam to get money. If you look at your TV, all these televangelists are cropping up all over, especially on Sunday. You know, they record their Sunday service, and then they want more money. They're not satisfied. They want more. So, you know, on the screen it says, please don't donate money to their ministries and stuff. And now they come up with these big telethons. TBN and just a few years ago, Daystar started it. And when I turned on TBN, it says, first thing you see, it says, "Welcome to the Holy Land." And it's nothing but that's all they're looking for is money. If you want, I mean, I don't see why we get caught up in this belief. I mean, we're you know, people say, I see why intelligent people, you know, most people can run companies and stuff like that. And I said, well, why would you fall for this? You have no evidence. You have no proof. See, my proof is that I've never seen no God, I've never spoken to no God, and no God has ever spoken to me. That's truth. And if you say, and it's common sense. So I think common sense is it's the problem. We don't use common sense. How do you think this Bernie Madoff was able to get $50 billion out of us for 11 years. And somebody was a whistleblower. Nobody believed him. So he was able to do another year and a half to get his $50 billion. Now, that's a disgrace. And yeah, a lot of people didn't want to come out. They was too embarrassed. They were too, I said, how can I let this guy take advantage of me? Because you believed. You didn't want to look. See, this is what we call, you have this circle. This is your belief. But if you don't look inside the circle, you won't want to, you just accept the belief as it is, Now, in 54, you allowed this lady to say, well, we need to be under God, and on the coins. I said, under what God? I've had no personal contact with this God. And we allow them to be nonprofits. Now this minister, Joel Osteen, 3 years, he amassed approximately $280 million. 3 years, all that's nonprofit. And they'll say phrases like, they'll say you're getting this thing gift free, but it's not free because they use the words. They'll say with your $19 or more donation, you'll get this gift. See? Because if it's free, it's supposed to be free. Why are they going to tell you how much money to donate? But they just change those words to with. See? So that nobody can say anything. See? And I think that they should be not allowed, not allowed to get this type of donation. Should be if you have more members, because they look at these members as dollar signs, then you have to start paying taxes if you go over a certain amount of people. See, and we should all join in at these churches and say, well, if you go to church to worship God, then where is God at to worship? He's supposed to be in on the celebration. And if I was one of you going to church, I would say, where is God? Where is God? Tell him. So I need people to wake up and start using common sense. And when you discuss this issue, make sure that in my last seconds is proof that there is a God, so we don't keep losing more money. Thank you.
Alan Navasardian, followed by Margaret Hammond.
Good evening, council members. My name is Alan Navasardian, and I'm here today to speak about the lack of funding received by Glendale Unified School District Schools and Glendale Community College. I am currently a junior at Clark Magna High School, which is currently ranked as the highest achieving high school in Glendale. My school lacks textbooks for some of its classes, which force the students to bring their own books to school because of the inadequate supply of textbooks for everyone else in the classroom. My school also uses outdated textbooks. For example, in my AP United States history class, students are using books published in 2006 that do not even document the 2008 elections and other major events that happened in American history. Other schools in GSD lack sufficient textbooks and use outdated materials too, which is why I'm asking the City Council for monetary grants to the school district for new textbooks. I would also like to speak on behalf of Glendale Community College because many of my peers and I may attend this college after we graduate from high school. GCC has downsized its availability of courses and has also depleted the majority of its winter courses. Glendale News Press reporter Megan O'Neill stated that the Glendale Community College officials have decided to eliminate the school's 2012 winter intersession as they struggle to cope with the state funding reductions of up to $10.7 million, a blow that could prompt administrators to cut this year's summer session of classes. GC is already overcrowded with students who struggle to choose all the classes they want to take each semester that are necessary for desired majors. Many GC students are going to transfer to a university in 3 years instead of 2 years because of these budget cuts. It should be one of the best interests of the city of Glendale and Glendale citizens to provide their students with the best education possible. GCC should receive the funding it deserves from the city of Glendale, and in effect, GCC will serve more students with the classes they need, and it will allow them to transfer to university within a 2-year time period. I've been following the rate increases for some of the city's public services, and I've noticed that the funds generated by these increases have not evidently been used to aid education. For example, the bus fare for the Glendale Beeline is triple what it was 5 years ago. 75 cents now, and back then it was 25 cents. The rate charged by Glendale's public libraries for an overdue book has increased, and the utility rates have also increased. I also acquired this packet which states that in 2011, approximately 700 Glendale City employees have salaries in excess of $100,000 per year. After 30 years of service, most of these employees will have a pension 90% for life of their last year of spiked income. I don't understand why many city employees are entitled to these unsustainable pensions when the average American receives less than $15,000 a year from Social Security. After making these observations, I advise actions that the city can do to adequately aid GUSD schools and GCC. The city should decrease the utility rates by at least 10% to allow its educational institutions to save money that can be used for purchasing classroom materials or expanding its classes. Now, I don't know the exact figures that Clark Magnet High School spends annually on its utilities, but for instance, if Clark Magnet High School spends $100,000 a year on its utilities, then its decrease in rates will allow this school to save $10,000 a year, which can be spent on textbooks and other essential classroom materials. The city can also provide millions of dollars to its educational institutions by greatly reducing the funds allocated for the pensions of retired city employees. These pensions only serve the personal interests of city employees and do not serve the public's interest of improving education. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Hammond, followed by Harry Zavos.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of council, city staff, and audience. My name is Margaret Hammond. First off, my free bulky item pickup phone number, 818-548-3916. Okay, here I am to report this evening that gender discrimination and ethnic bigotry are alive and well in Glendale. Witness last week's city council meeting. It started when Ms. Friedman reported that a citizen appointed by Councilman Najarian to a city commission position had a record of pornographic emails going back 5 years. Councilman Friedman, as was her duty, had the item agendized so that Citizen Sananian could be questioned as to the legitimacy of this evidence. He was asked, I think, at least probably 20 times, it seemed to me, if he was responsible for these emails. He never denied it. He refused that he was responsible. He refused to deny that he was responsible for these nasty messages. He would not deny sending them. A few years ago, Lenore Solis was accused of making ethnic remarks. She denied making them, and there was no proof of her making these remarks. But the city council kicked her off the commission anyway, and it was the Water and Power. Okay, did her being a female Hispanic have any bearing on her not being allowed to defend herself? But yet, last week, an Armenian male was allowed hours of time and finally given the opportunity to stay on the city commission because city council did not want to upset his family or hurt their feelings. What about the feelings of Lenore Solis's elderly parents and her son? Nobody cared about that, did they? Never offered her the opportunity that she should stay on if she could prove that no, she did not make these remarks. Again, being a female Hispanic doesn't warrant this kind of treatment by the council, and yet the male Armenian was allowed to remain on the commission. Thank you.
Harry Zavos, followed by Sharon Wiseman.
Measure B.
I got it. What happens?
My name's Harry Zavos. Lately, I've read from the charter laying out how it treats transfers of GWP monies for other than GWP uses. Now Measure B will change this. The only language authorizing transfers, and I emphasize the word only, appears in the charter section creating the GWP surplus fund. Up to now, I've concentrated on where those transfers go, on the GWP surplus fund's outflow. Tonight I'll focus on its inflow, on where the fund gets its monies. But before I do so, I would like to review its outflow. And I'm reading from Article 11, Section 22. Except as otherwise provided in this section, disbursements from said Glendale Water and Power Surplus Fund may be made for waterworks or electrical works purposes only. At the end of each year, an amount equal to 25% of GDP operating revenues shall be transferred from the said Water and Power Surplus Fund to the General Reserve Fund. So, money in the surplus fund can only be used for water and electric purposes, with one exception. An amount measured by 25% of the operating revenues of the utility can be transferred from this GWP surplus fund to the General Reserve Fund. As we've seen in previous weeks, the General Reserve Fund doesn't pay for general appropriations. In fact, last week we read from the charter that GWP monies are excluded from paying for general appropriations. Nevertheless, the city transfers $21 million annually from GWP to pay for general appropriations. Measure B would legalize this. What goes into the surplus fund and is available for transfers is given by two sections of the charter. The first from the section establishing the GWP surplus fund, Artie, and the second section establishing the GWP revenue funds, the funds that receive all revenues generated by the utility. I read from the first section. A fund to be known as a Glendale Water and Power Surplus Fund shall be credited from the receipts of the Glendale Water and Power and any amounts in excess of the requirements of the several funds as herein before set forth. Those several funds, as herein before set forth, include the Electric and Water Depreciation Fund, where every year GWP money should be deposited to cover normal depreciation, and where those monies should be used to pay for the repair, replacement, betterment, and extension of the utilities infrastructure. I read from the second section. The credit balance, if any, in each electrical and water revenue fund, the amount of which is in excess of the amount of all outstanding demands and liabilities unpaid from said fund on account of budgeted appropriations therefrom, shall be transferred to the Glendale Water and Power Surplus Fund. Clearly, the money credited to the GWP Surplus Fund and available for transfer is GWP surplus monies. Monies left after all GWP requirements have been met. That's why it's called the GWP Surplus Fund. But the city currently transfers $21 million of GWP money from the revenue fund, regardless of any surplus, and not to the General Reserve Fund, but to the fund that pays for general appropriations. And this in defiance of the Charter's prescription that GWP monies are not to go to that fund. Measure B eliminates the GWP surplus and General Reserve funds, as well as the GWP depreciation funds, and it legalizes the city's current practice of transferring GWP monies, regardless of any surplus, to pay for general appropriations. That's why I will vote no on Measure B. I'm not in favor of a charter that sanctions the city cannibalizing the utility to pay for general appropriations. And I don't want anybody to take my word for what those sections provide, so you can see online at www.oggc.org/harry.pdf an analysis which includes the texts of all the sections from the charter from which I've quoted, so you can see for yourself what they say.
Sharon Wiseman, followed by Lenore Solis.
Mayor Quintero, council members and staff, I'm Sharon Weissman from Far North Glendale. And first, on behalf of Crescenta Valley Community Association, I'd like to remind everybody that we're hosting a candidate forum. I guess this will probably be the last one for Board of Education candidates. You remember we already did the city council and city clerk candidates. This will be Thursday, March 28th, from 7 to 9. We'll have the Board of Education first, probably up to about 8:30, and then the last half hour for city clerk members. It's at the La Crescenta Library, 2809 Foothill Boulevard, La Crescenta, and please park upstairs behind the library building, because the library itself is closed and we're in the community room that's accessible from the upper parking lot. And if anyone, particularly the gentleman who's concerned about the cost of education, has questions, first of all, we welcome questions giving to us. You can send them to me, Sharon at jetcafe.org, or come to the forum and turn in your little 3x5 card at that time. And now on another topic, speaking completely as an individual, I want to thank Councilmember Friedman for bringing up online comments allegedly made by a candidate and commissioner for discussion at last week's meeting. I couldn't attend in person. I went to the ACLU meeting, locally, chapter. The discussion was gun violence in America, and I thought that was relevant to our city. And I especially want to commend Councilmember Friedman for strength in the face of the person who was alleged to make these comments, and his supporters who attacked her in a classic blame the messenger tactic. I similarly want to commend Scott Lowe of the Tropico Station blog for shedding light on a dark issue. Hateful comments need to be exposed and contradicted. Silence may imply agreement. It's a shame both Councilmember Friedman and the blogger were vilified and accused of political motives in shining light on a very difficult situation. I think the Council's reasoned discussion sent a message to those who behave as though the Internet is the Wild West where anything goes, that disgusting ethnic slurs and other shameful comments have no consequences. I believe it's not okay to hide behind a screen name or post anonymous hate speech, but that is very common in the online world. And were it not for, I understand, were it not for Google matching YouTube comments, the comments that were brought to light last week might never have been known about, and the existence of those thoughts would remain hidden. I note that when the Glendale News Press went to using Facebook as a platform for online comments on articles, the number of vicious, hateful statements were greatly reduced. When a person's name is open for all readers to see, it appears to me more care is taken to choose words more carefully and refrain from making insults. I hope we can all take a lesson from this situation and do better at disagreeing with each other, which is obviously part of human nature, but we can do it with a lot more civility. So thank you for your time this evening.
Lenore Solis.
Good evening, Lenore Solis, a resident of Glendale. I want to commend Ms. Friedman also. It was really sad to see so many people attacking her for bringing to light information that was truly, truly disheartening. And I really was shocked at the attitude of all of you, and I certainly appreciate Mr. Manukian's apology, but I was shocked at your attitude. I mean, Councilmember Friedman asked this gentleman several times to deny that he wrote these hateful messages. And, you know, and then for him to act as if he didn't know what you were reading, he had no idea what you were referring to. I mean, if somebody were to ask me, did you ever write that you hate such and such an ethnicity, I could emphatically say absolutely not, because I know I've never said that. I know I've never written that. And it's so disheartening that all of you, 4 gentlemen who are representing all of us in this city, could not read all that material and not listen to this man who was standing before you, who not once said, I did not write that. I emphatically deny that I ever wrote that. I think those things, what's written there is vicious. And for anyone to ever say that I had anything to do with that, they are vicious, and that is electioneering. But he never said that. And all of you gave him an unbelievable benefit of the doubt. When you accused me of something that was far, far less vile, none of you gave me the benefit of the doubt. None of you, pardon me, Mr. Quintero. Mr. Quintero was the only one who stood by me and came to our meeting. I organized a community meeting in Atwater Village. We had 400 people at that meeting. We had LA Fire, LA Police. We invited Mr. Bagdanian. We invited people from this city. None of you even responded. Thank God Mr. Quintero showed up. He was the only representative from the city of Glendale. Oh, were you there?
No, I wasn't on the council.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. Oh, please, let me make it very clear that Laura Friedman was not on council at that time. So I'm referring to council members Najarian, Manukian, and Weaver. Councilman Quintero was a very strong supporter and voted against my removal from the Glendale Water and Power Commission. But in all honesty, I mean, we all know that I wasn't removed because I organized a meeting in Atwater. The only person who ever said anything ethnic regarding this whole issue was Councilmember Councilmember Yusefian. He was the only guy I know who said, "Oh, we want to keep. Oh, good, put up that wall to keep those Mexican gang members out." I guess the opposite with that would be, I guess, to keep the Armenian power and Russian mafia in. I mean, I don't understand that. But I never said anything like that. At the community meeting that I had, the only media that was there was the Glendale News Press. A reporter from the Glendale News Press was there. Did any of you speak to the reporter to ask him what he witnessed? Did any of you read the article? It was very clear. The only place that an ethnic slur was made was in La Opinión. That was the only place, and that's because everything for them is always racial. Everything is somebody's against the Latino. That's what they're all about. The comments that were made were people that they interviewed, people I don't even know. So I'm responsible for comments that a reporter goes out in the neighborhood and starts asking people questions, and that's my fault? I don't think so. I can tell you emphatically that nobody that had anything to do with the organization of that meeting ever said anything ethnic, because it wasn't about ethnicity. It was about cutting off a major thoroughfare from Atwater Village North into Glendale. And so that's why thank God we were able to get the city attorney from Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti. They stepped in, and thank God that it didn't happen. But for you to give this gentleman all the benefit of the doubt, when he was unable to emphatically say, I did not write that, I do not think that way. And I turned to one of his supporters, a person whom I've known for years and whom I admire, and I said, what's wrong with that guy? Oh, he can't say no because he doesn't know what else they have. So he doesn't know that he never made those ethnic slurs against anybody? He doesn't know that he never said those vile things, calling people's members whores? I mean, I could tell you, I've never said that. I mean, what's wrong with you? Why would you not remove that man? Why would you give him such an incredible benefit of the doubt? Nobody cared about my son and my family. I mean, I just can't believe that you allowed him to remain with the evidence that you had before you. And I appreciate your apology, Mr. Manukian, but we all know that I was removed because of the comments I was making about the GWP transfers into the general fund, and that was the real reason.
Okay, any comments? All right, I guess there are no comments.
We adjourn. To the young Mr. Navasartian, educational funding is a complex issue. The city, unfortunately, does not play a direct role in that. A lot of it is based on average daily attendance, the adherence to Prop 98 at the state level. But it is a good point, and I do refer you to the forum that Ms. Wiseman is talking about, where you can perhaps ask the school board candidates their ideas on ways to increase funding to the schools. But one thing the city is doing is bringing in thousands of new residences in Glendale, and that does provide new students to the school, and the funding is based on the attendance. So as the schools grow, they get more money, and that is a benefit to the schools. So I'll just leave it at that.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.